For a year now, but really maybe 2, I have had on my New Year's resolution list and often on my weekly accountability list some version of the same goal or intention. It goes something like this: have more joy. It feels so awkward and maybe a bit pathetic and misguided to find joy, get joy, make joy on my resolutions, but I don't know how else to name it and hold it front and center, this feeling, this thing that feels missing. And mind you, it's not that I don't have joy in my life, but I don't have enough, of that rocket fuel that I sense is at the core of a life that is dreaming and risking and trusting and delighting full throttle the way I want my own to. And for sure, joy feels, I think, a bit harder right now. Can I get an amen? When our intimate national world is on fire. Erica Murray said that at the Hands Off March last week, her favorite sign was, "What is happening?" It's hard to feel joy when what is happening to all the institutions of learning, of social support, of peacemaking that you and I tend to and rely on and believe in as part of our lives. When what you believe in is being dismantled, it can be easy to feel anything but joy. A couple of weeks ago, I attended a wedding outside of Mexico City, and I was surprised when I landed back home after the wedding that I felt this heaviness, like that I hadn't felt it while we were away. You know how you feel it only when it returns. And I realized that what descended back on my shoulders when I landed wasn't just my worry, because I didn't take it with me. It was our worry. That it was literally palpable, that it was weighty, as if the atmosphere doubled in weight on the other side of the border. So the joyless is collective. And in case you needed any more proof than your own experience, you and I can turn to researchers at the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, who recently, and before the recent change in leadership, in a multi-year study of joy found, quote, modern culture is marked by joylessness. There you have it, people. A flattening out, they say, a graying of human experience, as they describe it. So even Yale says something bigger is going on at the moment. It's not just us. And ironic, too, at a time when entertainment is literally bursting out of our smartphones, that we are in a culture that's marked more and more by this pervasive sense of joylessness that we push against. Yale's counsel, in case you are interested, is to intentionally bring more joy into our lives. Really? Question is how, because clearly putting it on your annual resolutions and weekly accountability doesn't necessarily do the trick. So I thought we'd do just a little bit of hunting for clues. And if you have some, please share them with me, because we have a couple more Sundays to study joy. First, I was listening to an old interview of Brené Brown by Oprah Winfrey. It was from Oprah's Soul Sunday program, and it's from March of 2013. And in it, Brown says that she thinks from all her studies that the most terrifying emotion to most human beings is not despair, not fear, not what I think would be the obvious possible candidates. The most terrifying emotion, she said, is joy. She gives this example. She said, how many of us have stood at the crib of a child that we love while it sleeps, looked at it, and felt overwhelmed by how precious and beautiful this life is and how full our heart is with the good fortune of us having them in our lives, the bliss of their presence on earth. And then, Brown says, as soon as that feeling hits, immediately imagine all the things that could happen that are bad to this child. Does anyone know that kind of moment? Or the equivalent with some loved one sleeping in bed? Or something that you treasure, your pet. We dress rehearse tragedy, she says, in the face of such joy. We push huge joy away as if it's really dangerous to embrace. Does that sound familiar? Brown goes on to describe a man who, she says, by his own admission, said he spent his whole life keeping life braced, so he didn't feel anything too deeply. So a promotion at work or some success, it was something to nod your head with joy about and take a little credit for, but nothing too excited. And when there was a setback, you acknowledged it and the need to sort of work against it, but nothing too big to despair or grieve about. And he worked to keep his life in this narrow band of emotion. And then when he was in his 60s, he was in a horrible car accident, and his wife of over 40 years was killed. And in the moment he knew she was gone, he said, his first thought was that he should have let more joy in, because nothing protected him from the pain he felt in that moment. Brown thinks we fear joy because we've lost our tolerance for vulnerability. We act like we're invulnerable or like the illusion of control is our best way forward. Is she right? Do you and I fear vulnerability enough to banish joy? Maybe. Modernity has meant, if you think about it, a lot of protection from things that previous generations couldn't protect against, right? Crop failures meant famine. Infection meant death. More losses in childbirth and babies of mothers and wives and sisters and friends. The old cemeteries attest to it. Vulnerability was an everyday part of life. Coffins were in the front room for a week after death, bathed and prepared by the families. Life was precious. The elders were fewer. You danced at the harvests and you clung close in the winter. It was now or maybe never. But for us, it's true more than ever that if we play it safe, if we're lucky, if we have the ability and we play it safe, we go to our doctor's appointments, we get the measles vaccine, that colonoscopy, we save, we trust the government to store past harvests, and those seeds engineered to withstand locusts and low water tables, that we can survive. Maybe even alone we can survive, you and I. And I have talked to so many people in the last year who've shared something so human, so in the spectrum of life and what it throws at us from one direction or the other, from birth to death, that I wonder why it feels so vulnerable to share those things, as it so clearly does. So often something they keep almost only to themselves, they say. And I'm incredibly honored to hear those stories when I do. I'm sure all of us are when people risk sharing them, but I wonder in those moments why we feel we can't share all those pieces of ourselves, the human vulnerability that's just part of being in this world that bruises us and blesses us. As Brown points out, maybe that same force is what shuts us off from joy. And if it does, what would it mean to go at joy backwards? To backward engineer our way to it by apprenticing ourselves to vulnerability first. Take off the armor. What would that look like? John Buren's, when he preached at Rochelle and Don's wedding yesterday, he ended his homily that talked about them and their life together by reminding them that one of them would close the other's eyes. Love is grief's advance party, the Reverend Forrest Church used to say. And I have to say, John said this when my husband and I last year celebrated our 25th anniversary. And I remember then it surprised me, and it took me by surprise again yesterday, Rochelle, when he said that. Because, weddings and the celebration of anniversaries, aren't they supposed to be all about flowers and possibilities? But I know why John does it. If Brené Brown is right, and she is, we cannot actually drink the joy of love and time together until we let in, right beside it, the very real possibility of loss, the inevitability of loss. Now or never, right? Skip work occasionally and take a date day, people. Joy, as Shel Silverstein modeled in his Poetry and Life, is about throwing our creativity and our human love into the world, right? Leaving it behind. So the getting more joy maybe starts with dancing with this relationship with vulnerability and coming out of the closet about the piece of that scares us. I will be reflecting on that. I invite you all to. That's one clue. And here's the other piece I've been thinking about in the business of what might be holding us back from more joy. I wonder if we also feel guilty, or like it would be a betrayal of the world's suffering, the suffering we know so much about, to be joyful. Does that ring true for anyone? I mean, we've never had such a view into the world suffering, all of it, than we do in the 21st century. Not just intimate San Francisco suffering, but suffering around the world in Technicolor. I probably started around the time of Vietnam, right? That's what people talk about when the broadcast news had death and war in real-time moving color film. And now it's 24 hours available on lots of channels. Famine, dictatorship, climate disaster, you know the litany. It wakes you at night, prevents you from falling asleep. And the truth of the breadth of suffering is that it is soul brutalizing, right? And heart-rending. And we try to protect ourselves, so we take in only as much as we can stand. And I wonder if in the face of this knowing, celebrating, cutting loose, having fun can feel heartless and shallow. I sometimes feel, if I'm honest, the need to say somber and lead somber worship because something has always gone wrong in the world, and it feels like to come in lighthearted would be a betrayal of that, like I'm ignorant of it or I don't care. And we say, as you did, Sam, we say and we believe that until all of us are free from suffering and injustice, that none of us are free. But what does it mean to live that? How does joy fit into that, which is true? Are you with me on this? Our Visio Divina this month is 3 images from the Museum of Black Joy. I don't know how many of you have found this online museum. It's astounding, created by Andrea Philly-Walls on January 1st of 2020, right in the midst of the pandemic. And she started it to pull together photos and videos and things that captured the joy that had sustained people, Black people, through hard times. Because, as Adrienne Marie Brown and so many others and Audre Lorde have said, joy is a birthright for everyone. It's not some folks get it God who hands out joy. It's not a conditional gift of the universe, right? It's not a reward for us having finished our work or having our hair brushed in the morning. If there's a God, and I believe there is, she is grace-filled, abundant, extravagant love in technicolor, everywhere spilling out. And if we waited for all injustice to be righted, there would be no museum of Black joy. Yes? And yet, as Walls know, and everyone knows who has survived hardship, and we have all survived hardship if we are sitting here breathing, joy is the fuel of resilience. And it's a reminder of what we love and that we love, so that we will bother to save this world. Is it not? You and I will not save what we do not savor, right? As Sam said, as so many are saying now, because it's so true, joy is vital. Whatever that looks like for you, to dig into that, to make it a verb in your life, so vital to keeping spirit alive and so much else alive in us, as it always has been. Do you know when the Israelites crossed the Sea of Reeds, tragedy behind them and captivity and uncertainty and hardship ahead, chasing a dream, the first thing they did when they crossed the sea, the book of Exodus says, does anyone know what the first two things they did were? Anyone? Speak louder.
They rejoiced.
They rejoiced. They sang. Moses led the Israelites first in a song, and then Miriam got out her tambourine, and it says that in Exodus that all the women got out theirs, a reminder that when you are grabbing what you need most as you flee oppression and you take your unleavened bread and maybe a few family photos, you need to grab your tambourine. Why? Because what keeps you alive is joy, is song in the in-between of life. And on this Sunday, we celebrate and commemorate Palm Sunday, right? This time, Jesus has just been feeding these joyful, huge crowds miraculously and healing people this past with his family and friends. And he's ready to speak truth to power, hoping they'll be moved to change the world order toward equity and compassion and love. He's in the in-between moment, and he's stepping into Jerusalem, and he enters with what happening? People throw him a party. They throw down, Luke says in chapter 19, and as he rode along, people kept spreading their cloaks in the road. And as he was approaching the path down from the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of disciples began to praise God joyfully. Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, two men who have suffered immensely, wrote a book called The Book of Joy. Joy, Desmond Tutu said, is how, quote, we have hardship without becoming hard. We have heartbreaks without being broken. The takeaway is that joy is not shallow, and it's not optional in a life of faith, of endurance, of being spirit-led. We aren't noble or compassionate to the suffering, past, present, or future, if we shut down joy, and I need to remember that. Do you? So how do we start? How do we befriend vulnerability? How do we do the equivalent of carrying tambourines wherever we go and being ready with song? Brene Brown had some advice when talking to Oprah that interviewed So many years ago, Brown added one more thing to her observations about all the conversations she had had about joy. And she said how she noticed that there were some people who could stay in joy, who could let it in those moments when they're overwhelmed by the beauty and the gift of some aspect of life, the sleeping child or lover, the beauty of the landscape stretched before them, a room full of friends and loved ones, or the gorgeousness of a starry night. They didn't rehearse tragedy, she said. They didn't fight off vulnerability or feel like in a world of trouble they have no business feeling full of heart. Instead, she said, they practiced gratitude. In those moments, they just said a humble thank you for what is right now, come what may. Because trouble will come, it always has. And life, if we're honest, is always in between times. That's where we live in the present. So we are called to let joy have its hour, its day. Leave the windows of our heart open. Let it shake us to our bones, this ecstasy for this gift, this laughter of the moment, the mockingbird mass on our morning walk that my aunt wrote me about this morning. A body, a heart, a mind alive to know truth and feel goodness when we encounter it, and join lives with that force through it, in saving this world and in savoring it. The one that keeps hope alive, lives resilient, and reminds us of what we're fighting for, that reality we have to befriend is joy. I love you all. Spirit bless us all. Joy abound.